had traffic hogging lanes for hours was caused by $1 billion problem in Texas. Matt Malone has turned trash into treasure for a living for almost 20 years. In dumpsters just like this one, he says he's found confidential documents, military uniforms, and even family photos. The plan for P. Terry's is to expand outside of Austin into Houston in the next 2 years. But what about opening stores outside of Texas? The heavy wind snapped fences in two all throughout this neighborhood, and now residents are saying they're finding sharp pieces of wood and debris just like this one in their backyards. The Better Business Bureau says you can spot these scammers. If you're suspicious of a profile on a dating app, take a screenshot of that profile, then reverse image search it in Google. On this side is where he says residents' property ends, and on this side, he wants his condos to start. The fire broke out just before South by Southwest, one of the biggest moneymakers for pedicabs here in Austin. But a new city regulation during the festival may have come just in time to help. This is the empty driveway of 67-year-old Eddie Roland. This Vietnam veteran now has a new mission, finding a stolen car, and inside it, his missing wheelchair. These are the same levels that we saw last fall in Hurricane Harvey. When zebra mussels were found on this intake valve, city officials put in proactive measures to make sure that this invasive species didn't become an unwelcome guest on their shoreline. Right now, police are actively searching through surveillance video where a suspect gunned down a doctor here in the medical center early Friday morning. Management left this note on neighbors' doors earlier this afternoon detailing an apparent accidental shooting, but police say there's much more to the story. Patients slip in and out of consciousness, and afterwards they report feeling in a much better state of mind. In a settlement last July, 3M agreed to pay the Department of Justice $9.1 million because of these earplug allegations. One simple shot could protect you from both HPV and cancer, so why are so many Texas college students not getting it? Sheriff Chody really emphasized the importance of intercepting these drugs. He said that deputies literally saved lives yesterday when they pulled over a woman with hundreds of pounds of heroin and meth hidden in the tires of her car. Police say this may be one of the biggest drug busts Central Texas has ever seen. He took his own life in the neighborhood behind me earlier this morning. Ladies, we're all guilty of this, running inside and leaving our purses in the car for just a second. But for one woman in this quiet Bel Air neighborhood, that 1 second was just enough time for the purse snatcher who followed her home to see the perfect crime of opportunity.
The space race really is on again.
The latest space training program is launching not at NASA.
We're here to make a workforce for space.
But from this warehouse in Georgetown.
Commercial aerospace industry is catching up to the government aerospace.
OPEFX Global is training a new kind of space explorer.
It's always been controlled by the government, and now that commercialized, privatized industry is here, the sky's the limit.
Their mission is to create a fleet of blue-collar commercial astronauts, or what they call
Space Jack.
They hope to train about 8 to 10 Space Jacks every year. They'll be ready to do everything from repairing satellites to building colonies on other planets for private businesses. But these astronauts don't have to be rocket scientists to go to space. Now they're training people just like you and me.
We're looking for the average Joe and the average Joanne.
No PhD or jet pilot experience required. Their training is complete with a centrifuge that spins students around,
It could cause a little anxiety.
a neutral buoyancy tank approved by NASA and the government to simulate weightlessness,
The most fearful part of what training involves would be claustrophobia.
and a pool with a submerged car they borrowed from first responders to practice Earth landings. Wolfras says he sees a huge market for would-be astronauts in the next 10 years. They're now accepting applications. Laura Laughead, Texas Newswatch.
They were going too fast.
Joe Petrokovich says he was almost hit by a car just minutes before we spoke to him on Rainy Street.
I got spooked and they slammed their brakes.
Behind him, as we talked, another driver hits the brakes as a man plays dodgem in the street. Cars are constantly coming down Rainy Street. It's a huge problem for pedestrians dodging drivers, but it might be an even bigger challenge for drivers dodging pedestrians.
They'll just cross the street, not look at traffic, and just keep going.
Drivers say the tight lanes are the perfect storm of cars, scooters, and people who may or may not be sober.
I really think it needs to be blocked off. You know, it's just as busy as 6th Street.
Some call it an accident waiting to happen.
Trust me, I thought they were going to close this off like years ago.
Although the overcrowded sidewalks can send patrons into the streets, APD says that it hasn't seen any incidents that would justify shutting down car traffic.
We don't see the crowds in the street on Rainy as much as we do on 6th Street.
Lieutenant Dustin Lee says he doesn't know of any pedestrians who've been hit by a car on Rainy. He says that what works for 6th doesn't necessarily work for this street.
Rainy's it's a different kind of atmosphere. It's a different structure.
At this time, there are no plans to block off Rainy on the weekends, but Rainy pedestrians like Petrokovich hope that might change.
It seems like a no-brainer to me.
Laura Laughead, Texas Newswatch.